The lights were blinding, flashing across the stage in waves of red and blue. The crowd roared with excitement, their voices blending into a single thunderous chant, "Stevie! Stevie! Stevie!" Her name echoed through the arena, a reminder of her place in music history. She stood there, her signature shawl draped over her shoulders, eyes closed for just a moment, absorbing the energy. This was her home. For decades, Stevie Nicks had poured her soul into the music, weaving tales of love, heartbreak, and mystical dreams. Her voice, raspy yet powerful, had become the soundtrack of so many lives. But that night, something felt different. The magic was still there, but something darker lingered beneath the surface. People always saw the glamour, the glittering outfits, the wild hair, the iconic twirls that sent her shawl flying around her like wings. But few understood the weight she carried every time she stepped on stage. The battles she fought weren't just with the music industry, but with the very people she once called family. She would never forget those early days when everything was just beginning. Young and full of dreams, she believed that music would be her salvation. She had no idea that it would also become the source of her greatest pain. The backstage whispers grew louder over the years. Arguments that started as simple disagreements turned into full-blown conflicts. She remembered the first time she felt truly betrayed. It wasn't the typical drama you would expect from rock stars. It was deeper, more personal. Trust, once solid and unbreakable, began to crack. She tried to hold it together for the sake of the music, for the fans who loved them. But every time she stepped off that stage, the weight grew heavier. She would look around at the faces she had known for so long and wonder where it all went wrong. There were moments of pure magic, times when the music flowed effortlessly, and the bond between them seemed unbreakable. But then there were moments when she felt completely alone, standing among friends yet feeling isolated. Stevie had always been strong, but even the strongest hearts have limits. The decision didn't come suddenly. It was a slow realization, a buildup of years of tension and heartache. Every tour, every performance, she would wonder if this was the last time. She kept going, mostly out of loyalty to the music and the memories they had created. But deep down she knew. She knew that one day she would have to walk away, not just for her sanity but for her soul. Fans never saw the tears, the arguments, the nights when she would sit alone, questioning everything. They only saw the glitter and the gold, but behind those shimmering outfits was a woman fighting to hold on to herself. She tried to make peace, to find a way back to the magic they once had. But sometimes, things break so completely that there's no way to fix them. There were offers, big ones. Promoters reached out, promising millions for a reunion. The fans wanted it, the world wanted it, but Stevie stayed silent. She would get calls, messages, people pleading with her to reconsider. But every time she thought about stepping back onto that stage with them, the memories came flooding back. Not just the good ones but the ones that haunted her, the betrayals, the broken promises, the nights spent wondering if it was all worth it. It wasn't an easy choice. Music was her life, her identity. Walking away from it meant letting go of a piece of herself. But Stevie had always been stronger than people realized. She knew that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save you. So she chose herself. She chose peace over chaos, sanity over conflict. And while the world may never fully understand why, Stevie Nicks is at peace with her decision. She walked away, not out of anger, but out of necessity. The stage lights still call to her sometimes. The roar of the crowd is something you never forget, but for Stevie, the cost of returning was too high. She found her voice in music, but she found her strength in silence. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. The news spread quickly, faster than anyone could have imagined. Fans woke up to headlines splashed across every major outlet, each one more dramatic than the last. Stevie Nicks had made her choice, and it was final. She would never perform with them again. At first, many refused to believe it. Rumors came and went all the time in the world of music. Bands broke up and got back together. It was part of the cycle. But this time something felt different. Her words were sharp and clear, with no room for misunderstanding. It wasn't just a phase or a temporary disagreement. It was a decision that shook the very core of those who had followed her journey for decades. The whispers started almost immediately. What could have happened that was so bad, so unforgivable, that Stevie would turn her back on everything they had built together? People searched for answers, digging through interviews, old performances, and backstage footage. Everyone wanted a clue, a glimpse into the storm that had been brewing behind closed doors. But Stevie had always been careful with her words, only hinting at the truth without revealing too much. It was her way, mysterious, guarded, always leaving just enough room for wonder. Some said it was creative differences, the kind that often breaks even the strongest of bands. After all, when legends come together, there is bound to be conflict. Great minds don't always agree, especially when passion is involved. Others believed it was personal, rooted in betrayals and broken promises that couldn't be forgiven. The kind of wounds that don't heal with time. Stevie had always been sensitive to loyalty and trust. It wasn't just about the music for her, it was about the bond, the connection with those she performed with. When that was shattered, it wasn't easy to pretend. There were stories of heated arguments, words thrown like daggers, and moments of rage. People spoke of days when the tension was so thick you could feel it in the air. Stevie would walk off stage without saying a word, her expression distant and cold. Those who were close to her said she would spend hours alone after shows, sitting quietly with her thoughts, the echo of the crowd still ringing in her ears. It wasn't just about the music anymore, it was about survival. She had fought to keep it together for so long, but even the strongest walls crumble under too much pressure. Fans tried to make sense of it all. They looked back at performances, searching for signs they might have missed. Some pointed out moments when she seemed distant on stage, her eyes fixed somewhere far away, as if she wasn't really there. Others noticed how she would sometimes pause before certain songs, as if the memories tied to them were too heavy to carry. Stevie had always been good at hiding her pain, masking it with her mystical stage presence. But now, with the truth out in the open, those small moments began to make sense. The media, of course, took the story and ran with it. Every tabloid had its own version of what happened. Some claimed it was just another stunt to sell tickets or boost record sales. But those who knew Stevie knew better. She wasn't one to play games with her music or her legacy. If she said she was done, she meant it. Her words carried weight because they were spoken with conviction. She wasn't trying to make headlines. She was making a choice for herself, one that was long overdue. People close to her began to speak out as well, confirming what many had suspected. The tension had been growing for years, building slowly until it became impossible to ignore. There were moments of peace, of course, brief flashes of the old magic that had made them famous. But those moments became fewer and farther between. The rest of the time was filled with silence, with unspoken words that lingered in the air long after the music stopped. For Stevie, it was more than just a decision. It was a statement. A promise to herself that she would no longer be part of something that brought her pain. She had given everything she had to the music, poured her soul into every lyric, every note. But somewhere along the way, the joy began to fade, replaced by something darker. It wasn't easy for her to walk away, but she knew it was the only way forward. Even now, fans continue to hope for a change of heart. They dream of one last performance, a final goodbye to the music that defined an era. But Stevie's words remain strong and unyielding. She has found peace in her decision, a sense of freedom that had been missing for too long. The stage lights may still call to her, the crowds may still chant her name, but Stevie Nicks has made her choice. And for the first time in a long time, she is finally free. Stevie Nicks always had a certain magic about her. On stage, she was almost otherworldly, spinning and twirling with her long shawls flowing behind her like wings. Fans would watch in awe as she poured her soul into every song, her voice carrying the weight of stories untold. But behind the glitter and gold, there was a different side to Stevie. A side very few people knew. She had always been strong, but strength doesn't come without scars. Her journey to stardom wasn't just marked by success, it was marked by battles, both public and private, that shaped her into the legend she became. When people think of Stevie Nicks, they think of the music, the concerts, the magic she brought to the stage. But few know about the storms she faced behind the scenes. Fame had its price, and she paid it over and over again. There were struggles that she never spoke of, moments of pain that she carried with her into every performance. She knew how to hide it well, masking her sadness behind a smile, and her strength behind her music. But there were cracks, tiny moments when the weight of it all showed through. A pause during a song, a distant look during an interview. Hints that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Stevie had always been protective of her story. She shared pieces of it through her songs, using her lyrics to tell the world what she couldn't say out loud. But there was always more. More pain, more conflict, more heartache. For years she kept it all hidden, believing that the music was more important than her own struggles. She would stand on stage with the very people who had hurt her, smile for the cameras, and perform like nothing was wrong. But inside she was fighting battles that no one could see. There were moments when she almost walked away, times when the weight of it all felt too much to carry. But she stayed mostly for the music and partly because she still believed things could change. She would look around at her bandmates, remembering the good times, the early days when everything was simple, and the music was all that mattered. Those memories kept her going, even when things got rough. But memories can only carry you so far. The tension grew slowly, creeping into rehearsals, backstage meetings, even the studio. Little arguments turned into big ones, misunderstandings turned into grudges. Stevie tried to keep the peace, holding things together with the same strength that carried her through so many storms before. But it wasn't enough. The cracks continued to grow, and with them her patience began to fade. She realized that she was holding on to something that no longer existed. The magic, the connection, the bond that once made them unstoppable. It was gone, replaced by silence and distance that no amount of music could fix. People around her began to notice the change. She was quieter, more reserved. She stopped staying after shows to talk and laugh like she used to. Instead, she would retreat to her own space, shutting out the noise and the tension that seemed to follow them everywhere. Some said she was just tired, worn out from years of performing. But those who knew her best knew it was more than that. She was slipping away, little by little, from the very thing that had once been her entire world. It wasn't that she stopped loving the music. That part of her was still very much alive. But the music came with memories, and those memories weren't always kind. She would close her eyes and remember the arguments, the accusations, the moments when everything fell apart. It became harder and harder to separate the music from the pain. Performing was no longer just about singing. It was about facing ghosts she wanted so desperately to forget. Her friends tried to talk to her, to convince her to give it one more shot. "It's not the same," she would say. Her voice soft but firm, and they knew she meant it. Stevie had always been passionate, always poured everything she had into her performances. If she couldn't give her heart to it, she didn't want to do it at all. And her heart wasn't there anymore. It had been chipped away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to give. The final decision wasn't made in anger. There were no dramatic exits, no shouting or slammed doors. Just a quiet acceptance that things had changed. She had given everything she could, sacrificed more than most people would ever understand. But it was time to let go. She needed peace, she needed space, and most of all, she needed to find herself again, away from the noise, away from the tension, away from the shadows of what once was. Stevie Nicks knew her choice wouldn't be understood by everyone. People would judge, rumors would spread, but she didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she was choosing herself. She walked away from the stage, not out of weakness, but out of strength. The kind of strength that only comes from surviving the storms that try to break you. And as she stepped away, she found something she hadn't felt in a long time. She found freedom. The fans were shocked when Stevie Nicks made the announcement. The news hit the media like a tidal wave, leaving fans wondering if they had missed something, if there had been a sign they didn't catch. It felt like a punch to the gut. How could she walk away from them? The very people who had followed her every move for years, who had cheered for her on every stage, were left wondering what had gone wrong. It wasn't just the fans who were confused. Even those closest to her were surprised by her decision. Stevie, after all, had always been the kind of artist who gave everything she had to her music. She didn't do things halfway. But this time it was different. This time there was no going back. The music world wasn't ready for this. Everyone knew that Stevie Nicks was a force, a woman who had been through her share of struggles but always seemed to rise above them. People expected her to keep pushing forward, to endure, to fight through whatever obstacles came her way. But this was a fight she was no longer willing to fight. It wasn't about the music anymore. It wasn't about the fame or the tours or the screaming fans. It was about her life, her peace, and her happiness. And when she realized that she was no longer finding those things in the world she had spent her life building, she made the decision to walk away. But why? What had pushed Stevie to this point? What happened behind the scenes that led her to give up something she had worked so hard for? Some people speculated that it was simply a matter of creative differences. After all, when a band has been together for as long as Stevie and her bandmates, it's bound to happen. Ideas clash, dreams shift, and personalities can rub against each other. But the truth was far deeper than just a difference of opinion. Stevie's departure wasn't the result of a single argument or a single disagreement. It was the result of years of built-up tension, years of pain that had never been fully dealt with. She had been holding on to something that no longer served her, and at some point, she had to let go. The cracks had started to show long before she finally walked away. Stevie had always been known for her ability to remain calm and collected. for her professionalism on stage. But off stage it was a different story. There were times when the stress of her career, the pressure of keeping everything together, weighed on her in ways that no one could see. She had always been the rock, the one everyone could rely on, the one who kept her cool no matter what. But even rocks can crack under pressure, and that's exactly what happened. The pressure of being in a band that no longer felt like home, the pressure of being surrounded by people who couldn't understand her pain, became too much to bear. Fans never saw the late nights, the sleepless hours spent alone, the moments of doubt that crept into her mind. All they saw was the woman who stood on stage, the woman who sang with passion and grace. But for Stevie, it wasn't just about the music anymore. She was caught between the person she had been for so many years, and the person she was becoming. And the person she was becoming needed peace. She needed to let go of the past and move forward into a future that didn't carry the same weight, the same brokenness. But as she made the decision to leave, there was still a part of her that hesitated. She loved the fans. She loved the music, she loved the thrill of the stage, and the energy of the crowd. But she knew deep down that she couldn't keep living in the shadows of something that no longer brought her joy. And so she made the hardest decision of her life. She walked away, and the world watched, waiting for her to explain why. But Stevie didn't explain, she didn't have to. Her decision spoke for itself. The questions from the media came flooding in. They wanted answers, they wanted to know what had happened, what had led to this moment. But Stevie remained silent. She had made her choice, and that was all that mattered. It wasn't that she was angry or bitter. It wasn't that she hated the people she had worked with for so many years. It was simply that she had outgrown that chapter of her life. She had given everything she could. And now it was time for her to find a new path, one that was more aligned with the person she had become. In the weeks and months that followed, Stevie's decision continued to be a topic of conversation. Fans debated, bandmates reflected, and the world tried to make sense of it all. But what they didn't understand was that Stevie didn't owe them an explanation. She didn't need to justify her decision, she was choosing herself. And that was the most important thing she could do. Stevie had always been a fighter. Always been willing to put everything on the line for her music. But this time she realized that in order to truly fight for herself, she had to let go of what no longer served her. She had to walk away from the things that were holding her back, from the people who couldn't see the toll it was taking on her. And while the world may never fully understand why she made that choice, Stevie Nicks knew one thing for certain. It was the right decision. As the story of Stevie Nicks walking away from something she had once cherished spread, the reactions were mixed. Some fans stood by her, applauding her decision to take control of her life, while others were filled with confusion and disbelief. The world of music had always seen its fair share of breakups and departures, but this felt different. Stevie wasn't just leaving a band, she was leaving a legacy, a part of her life that had shaped who she was. It wasn't an easy decision to make, and for those who had followed her from the beginning, it was hard to accept that she was truly done. The curiosity surrounding her decision only grew as time went on. What had caused the change in her? What was the final straw that made her decide to walk away? Was it a personal issue, a clash of egos, or something deeper? Fans couldn't help but wonder if there was something they had missed along the way. Stevie had always been a private person, a woman who carefully guarded her emotions. Even when she wrote her songs, they were often filled with metaphors and subtle hints, leaving fans to piece together the story themselves. So when she stepped away from the band, there was no grand explanation, no press conference to reveal her reasons. She simply made her decision and left it at that. For many, this only added to the mystery. Stevie was known for her mystique, for the way she seemed to live in a world that was just out of reach for most people. She wasn't one to share everything with the public, and that made her departure feel even more significant. It was as if she was holding on to a secret, something so personal that she couldn't or wouldn't share it. And this only made people more curious. What had happened behind closed doors? What had led to her decision to leave everything behind? In interviews, some of her closest friends and colleagues tried to shed light on the situation. They spoke about the long hours, the exhausting tours, and the emotional toll that came with being in a band. But even they didn't seem to fully understand what had happened. It was clear that Stevie had reached a breaking point, but what had caused it? Was it the relentless pressure of being a public figure, or was there something else at play? The truth, as it often is, was more complicated than anyone realized. Stevie's decision wasn't just the result of a single event or a moment of anger. It was a culmination of many factors, some of which had been brewing for years. She had been part of the music industry for so long that it had become a part of her, and yet as time passed she began to feel disconnected from it. What had once been a source of joy and purpose now felt like a weight, a burden she was no longer willing to carry. As Stevie stepped away, she didn't just leave behind her bandmates or her career. She left behind a version of herself. She was no longer the same person who had stepped onto that stage for the first time, full of excitement and dreams. She had changed, evolved, and with that came a need for something different. The world of music, with all its glamour and fame, no longer held the same appeal. What she once found inspiring, she now found draining. The constant pressure to perform, to be something for everyone else, had started to take its toll. But even as she distanced herself from her past, there was still a part of her that held on to the memories. Music had been a part of her life for so long that it was impossible to imagine a future without it. She wasn't giving up on music entirely, she was simply changing the way she approached it. She was no longer going to allow it to define her, to dictate her happiness, and that was a powerful statement. Stevie had always been known for her strength, for her ability to rise above challenges and keep moving forward. But in this case, her strength was in her ability to walk away. She wasn't running from her past, she was taking control of her future. It was an act of self-preservation, of reclaiming her life and her peace of mind. For someone who had given so much to her career and her fans, this was her chance to finally give something to herself. But despite her decision, the questions kept coming. Would she ever return? Would there be a time when she would step back onto the stage with her bandmates, put the past behind her, and perform again? The fans held on to hope, even as they tried to understand why she had left. Could there be a reunion in the future? Could time heal the wounds that had been inflicted? For Stevie, the answer was simple: she had no idea. She wasn't focused on what the future might hold. What mattered to her now was the present. She had taken the time to reflect, to heal, and to figure out who she really was outside of the spotlight. And as she did that, she realized that the path forward might not involve a return to the past. The music she had created would always be a part of her, but the life she had lived had changed. The person who had once lived for the stage was no longer the same person. She had evolved, and now it was time to evolve in a new way. Even though Stevie had made her choice, there was still a part of her that felt a deep connection to the fans who had supported her for so long. She knew that her decision would be hard for many to understand, but she hoped that in time, they would see it for what it was. A brave step toward finding peace. It wasn't about leaving her fans behind, it was about finding herself again. The world would continue to speculate about her decision, about what had really happened, but Stevie Nicks knew that the truth was far more complex than anyone could imagine. She had made her choice, and now she was living for herself. She wasn't worried about what others thought of her decision. She had spent her whole life trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to live up to the image they had of her. But now she was ready to live for herself. And in doing so, she found a peace that she had been searching for all along. As the final chapter of Stevie Nicks' journey unfolded, the world couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her. Fans who had once been captivated by her every move, her every performance, now found themselves in a quiet place of reflection. They had always known her to be a figure of resilience, someone who had weathered many storms and come out stronger on the other side. But this decision to step away from everything she had built was different. It wasn't about strength this time, it was about something deeper, something more personal. For years, Stevie had been the face of a generation, a voice that spoke to the heart of millions. She had written songs that transcended time, crafting lyrics that told stories of love, loss, and the search for meaning. But despite all the success, despite the countless accolades and the adoration from fans, there had always been a part of her that felt like something was missing. For the longest time, she didn't know what it was. She thought that maybe the music would fill the void, or that the applause of thousands would be enough to satisfy the emptiness. But as time went on, she realized that nothing outside of herself could provide the peace she so desperately sought. As she took a step back from the life she had once lived, she found herself facing a new reality, one where she no longer needed the approval of others to define her worth. For years, Stevie had been caught in a whirlwind of expectations, pressures, and constant demands. She had been everything to everyone, but in doing so, she had lost sight of who she was underneath it all. Music had always been her escape, her therapy, but it had also become a double-edged sword. While it brought her joy, it also brought pain. She had been constantly pushing herself to be something more, something greater. But at what cost? Her decision to walk away wasn't just about leaving the stage or the band, it was about leaving behind a version of herself that no longer served her. She wasn't giving up on music, she wasn't abandoning her fans. What she was doing was much more profound. She was reclaiming her life, her peace, and her identity. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition anymore. It was about being true to herself, finding the joy in life that had been overshadowed for so long by the demands of her career. The world didn't understand this at first. They saw it as a loss, a tragedy. How could someone who had given so much to the world walk away from it all? How could someone who had been a part of something so magical simply step away and choose to leave? But for Stevie, it wasn't about what the world saw. It wasn't about the expectations of others. It was about her own journey, her own healing. She had spent years giving to others, pouring herself into her music and her fans, but now it was time to focus on herself. Stevie had always been a woman of strength, but her strength wasn't in staying in a situation that no longer brought her happiness. Her strength was in recognizing when it was time to walk away. She had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. The world might see it as giving up, but she saw it as moving forward, finding a new path, and allowing herself the space to grow. As the months passed, the speculation about Stevie's future continued. Would she return to the stage? Would she reconnect with her former bandmates? Fans held on to the hope that one day they would see the magic again, that one day she would return to the music they loved. But Stevie knew better than anyone that the magic was never gone, it had just evolved. The world might not understand it, but she had come to realize that the music she made would always be a part of her, but it wasn't everything. There was more to life than the stage, more to life than the applause. As she navigated her new life, Stevie found comfort in the simple things. She spent time with those who mattered most to her, away from the public eye. She embraced the quiet moments, the moments that allowed her to reflect and heal. She no longer felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had found peace in the stillness, in the space that had once been filled with constant noise and expectation. And it was in this quiet that she rediscovered herself. Her decision to step away had been a long time coming, but it wasn't an easy one. There were moments when she second-guessed herself, wondering if she was making a mistake, wondering if she would ever feel the same joy from music that she once did. But as time went on, she realized that the joy she had been seeking had never truly left her, it had just been buried under the pressure of being everything to everyone. She had been so focused on meeting the expectations of others that she had forgotten to meet her own needs. And now she was finally giving herself permission to do that. The world may never fully understand why Stevie Nicks made the decision she did. People will always speculate, always question. But the truth is that she had found something far more important than fame or fortune. She had found herself. And that, she knew, was worth more than anything else. Her fans might never see her the same way again, but she knew that they would always carry the music with them. She had created something that would live on long after she had stepped away from the spotlight. And that was something to be proud of. Stevie's story wasn't over, it had simply entered a new chapter. She may have left behind the world she had known, but she was not leaving behind the woman she had become. She had walked away from something that no longer served her, and in doing so she had found a deeper sense of purpose. It was no longer about what she could give to the world. It was about what she could give to herself, and in that she had discovered the true meaning of freedom.